Lies of P takes cues from Software, but it's not just a blatant, boring Dark Souls clone or Bloodborne clone. My initial interest in this game was sparked when I saw claims that it was similar to Bloodborne with a little bit of Sekiro sprinkled in there. Kinda. There's some Bloodborne in here. It's more Bloodborne than any of the mainline Souls games with its Victorian Gothic setting, but I see influence from multiple games here. It's like a mishmash of all my favourites: Resident Evil 4, Devil May Cry 3, hell, even Devil May Cry 5 with the funky robotic arms you can get. The combat, like Sekiro, parrying is your main defensive option in this one. Dodging is often much less lucrative in this game. It's fucking badass to perfect parry an enemy and snap the weapon. If you get hit and return fire, you can snatch back some of the health that they stole, like Bloodborne. The Legion arm, there's a variety of these, all with unique abilities, but like the weapons, they all scale with your attributes differently, so you're better off just kind of sticking with one until you unlock the ability to redistribute your attributes. About halfway through the game, you can freely switch your build around as much as you please. It's tied to an in-game currency, these gold coin fruits. So thankfully, if you put a lot of points into technique, for example, but then want to try a weapon that scales better with motivity, it's much easier to do it in this game than a lot of the other Souls-likes I've played. And the moonstones required to upgrade your weapon are pretty common. The further you get into the game, the more items are just thrown at you like they're nothing, though the core combat is essential for setting this game aside as its own thing. It's able to stand alone with its unique blend of familiar yet distinct mechanics. The parrying, the guard regain, the fable bars. The upgrade tree is good too. It's not sprawling or forced like many other games I've played. It's very simple, and the abilities actually benefit the gameplay rather than just being a 5% buff of something that you can barely notice in the first place. Like this one makes it so that perfect parries paralyze your enemy momentarily. The potency and quantity of your heals are tied to the upgrade tree as well, so that's something different about this game. Let's go back to the combat. My absolute favourite part is how you must manually trigger an enemy stagger. In other games like this, you often just continuously hit them and hope for a stagger. In Lies of P, you do the same until the health bar starts flashing, to which you must find the perfect time to charge up a heavy attack. If you've charged it to maximum, you'll stagger them 100% of the time. In my opinion, this way it feels earned and much more skill based. Plenty of feedback on all the other hits too. The puppets will splash you in oil as you tear them apart. Carcasses will splatter you with their ever-changing coloured goop. Can be a bit much sometimes, especially if you're a fan of the starter outfit. Your shirt is white until you fight one enemy and now it's covered in oil and shit. It's fantastic. Still though, I would rather have this in the game than not. One thing I would rather leave on the cutting room floor though is the weapon durability. Breath of the Wild fans just pulled the covers over their face. If your weapon durability drops to 0, it won't break, you're just unable to use it. However, you can fix it on the fly, just with the press of a button, and it resets every time you hit a checkpoint too, so you don't really notice it with the exception of a few longer boss fights. It's not bad, but it just feels kind of unnecessary as it doesn't really pose much of a real challenge anyway. It's always a case of being engaged with a boss, then out of the corner of your eye, you'll notice your durability is low, so you have to find some space to fix it. Some might say it adds an additional level of strategy to the game, and some would be right, but like I said, it's an entirely unnecessary level of strategy to increase difficulty in an otherwise confidently simplistic combat system. Speaking of the difficulty, I know how to play these games now. I know all the tricks and whatnot, but I still played fair. You know, I didn't summon on any boss fights or anything in my deduction. The difficulty is perfect right up until the final stage, but just like every Souls-like game, almost like it's a tradition at this point, traversing the world is harder than the actual fucking boss fight. Seriously, this has some shocking enemy placement at times, and enough status effects to give you a migraine. Especially the final zone, seriously, just look at some of this absolute fucking bullshit. I know it's par for the course, it's expected in these types of games, but I'm not blinded by my enjoyment. This is still fucking dumb, leaning on abysmal. Let me reiterate, this is not exclusive to Lies of P. This is in every Souls-like, and it's just as bad in those games as it is in this one. Moving on to the bosses now. There are some highlights here. Big fuck-off puppets, a quartet of brothers, abominations, and swamp things all have their own strengths, but what I appreciate is this game's balance between humanoid and giant bosses. Some bosses even start big and then become humanoid for the second phase. Runbacks are usually pretty forgiving, but there's 2 or 3 that are slightly longer than they need to be. It doesn't add anything to the game to make me run through an area again to face a boss, but like I said, most are pretty forgiving, and I've become so desensitized to the tedium, it doesn't really bother me anymore. And the boss fights themselves make up for any previous shortcomings. I did enjoy pretty much every single boss. There's one boss in particular I would like to discuss a little bit further, but he is quite late game, so if you don't want that spoiled for you, feel free to skip to the next chapter or this time. We all good? Nameless puppet. Wow. Like a mixture of Melania and Ishin, the glint before a rushing attack. Ishin. This stupid shit, Melania. This giant jumping sweep attack. Ishin. I mean, he kinda looks like the orphan until his second phase where he's just kinda giving me Dark Dimension Vader vibes. The story. I don't really want to discuss it too much, but I'll give you a brief synopsis, a sales pitch, if you will. The titular character, P, awakens and ventures out into a city overrun by frenzied puppets. People are zombified and have been overtaken by the petrification disease. It's your job and your duty to forge through this apocalyptic world and find the cause of all this madness. You won't be entirely alone, but for the most part, you'll only have your own arms to rely on. You will converse with a number of Krat citizens and will often have the choice between telling the truth and lying. All will impact the outcome of the game and its many endings. Funnily enough, quick story. Spoilers here too, so feel free to skip to this point in the video or the next chapter. So, to fight the nameless puppet, you must choose a specific option at the end of the game, which I did in my first run, having paid attention to the story. But I didn't record any footage of this fight, as I was in a voice call and had no real intention of discussing this fight to begin with anyway. Then after the fact, I was like, that was actually pretty cool, I'll talk about that in the video. But with what footage, sonny boy? So I ran through the entire game again, start to finish, beat every single boss again with the New Game Plus scaling, which is pretty fucking hard, by the way. The health bars become inflated as shit, it's ridiculous. I get to the point of no return where you make the executive decision and I'm only given one option, the wrong option. You need to have developed enough humanity throughout the game by interacting with other people and doing other human-like shit. I didn't do any of that in my second run because I was just trying to get through it quickly, so that's fun. So, you know, yet again, thank you to 100% Guides for the footage. But aside from that little personal mishap on my behalf, the story's pretty good. There's enough there that you actually do care about what you choose for Pete to say. My favourite guy is Alidoro. It's not made by From Software, and you can tell it has its own distinctions. I'd argue it's actually better in some areas, or maybe I just prefer what differs about this game, like the upgrade tree. I love being able to manually stagger the enemies too, that's a highlight for me. Love the more stylized world. I can see why people compare it to Bloodborne, but while they do share a few visual traits, Bloodborne is exceptionally dark in terms of writing, lore, and the visuals. They all work together to make an oppressive, overwhelming, isolating journey for the hunter. And I do mean that as a compliment. The atmosphere is so thick in that game, you would struggle to cut it with a knife. This game's atmosphere isn't as strong, but it's still great. For its few shortcomings, it makes up for it with its variety of areas, the amount of weapons that are actually viable and worth using. Exploration is always rewarded, and even if it wasn't, it's a privilege to be able to walk through this weird, wonderful world. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.